the gates quick with a birdie from 21 feet.
And Mikey had the least amount of feats made yesterday in putts.
Golf has always balanced two powerful forces, tradition and technology. On one hand, the bag. Materials like titanium, carbon fiber, and advanced polymers have pushed performance further than anyone could have imagined just a few decades ago. But every so often, a piece of equipment appears that pushes things too far, so far that the governing bodies of the sport decide it crosses the line. When that happens, the club doesn't just disappear quietly. Instead, it becomes one of golf's most fascinating categories of gear. Equipment that is simply too powerful to be allowed in professional competition. The rules that determine what equipment is allowed in elite competition are controlled by organizations like the United States Golf Association and the R&A. These organizations regularly test clubs, balls, and accessories to make sure they stay within strict performance limits. Their goal is simple: ensure that golf remains primarily a test of human skill rather than technological advantage. When equipment exceeds those limits, it is declared non-conforming, meaning it cannot be used in professional events such as those on the PGA Tour. One of the most talked about examples in recent years is the Crank Formula Fire driver. At first glance, it looks like any other oversized modern driver, but inside the club face is technology designed specifically for extreme ball speed. In golf equipment testing, one of the most important measurements is the COR, coefficient of restitution. Essentially, this measures how efficiently energy transfers from the club face to the golf ball at impact. The governing bodies set a strict maximum COR limit of 0.830. Anything higher means the club face behaves like a spring, launching the ball with additional speed. The Crank Formula Fire driver pushes that boundary far beyond what is allowed in professional play. Its face is engineered with a thin, highly flexible structure that produces what golfers call a trampoline effect. When the ball strikes the face, the surface compresses and then rebounds rapidly, transferring more energy into the ball. In real-world terms, that extra efficiency can translate to enormous distance gains. Some golfers have reported drives traveling 20 to 25 yards farther compared to standard conforming drivers. For a professional golfer, that kind of advantage would completely change the competitive balance of the sport. As a result, the driver is banned from professional tournaments, even though recreational golfers can still buy and use it freely. Another famous example is the Callaway ERC2 driver. When it was released in the early 2000s by Callaway Golf, it quickly became one of the most controversial clubs in the sport's history. The ERC2 was designed with an ultra-thin titanium face that flexed significantly at impact. This flexibility generated extremely high ball speeds, which meant longer drives even for average golfers. Professional players immediately noticed the performance boost, and the governing bodies stepped in quickly. Testing revealed that the club face exceeded the COR limit, meaning it effectively provided mechanical assistance beyond what the rules allowed. As a result, the ERC2 was declared non-conforming for tournament play. Ironically, the ban only increased its reputation. Many recreational golfers began seeking it out specifically because it was considered too powerful for professional competition. But drivers aren't the only equipment that has crossed the line. Even golf balls have occasionally been engineered in ways that give players an unfair advantage. One of the most unusual examples is the Polara self-correcting golf ball. Unlike standard golf balls, which rely entirely on a golfer's swing for direction, the Polara ball was designed with a special internal weighting system. This design altered the aerodynamics of the ball during flight. In simple terms, the ball actually corrected itself in midair. Slices and hooks, two of the most common mistakes in golf, would gradually straighten out as the ball traveled down the fairway. For amateur players struggling with accuracy, the improvement could be dramatic. Some users reported reducing their shot curvature by up to 75%. But from a rules perspective, that meant the ball was effectively doing part of the golfer's job. Because of that, it was banned from tournament play. Another equipment rule that changed the professional game involved putting rather than driving. For decades, some golfers used long putters that were anchored against their bodies. These included belly putters and broomstick-style putters that rested against the chest or stomach. Anchoring created a stable pivot point, which dramatically reduced hand movement during the putting stroke. Players who struggled with shaky hands or the dreaded yips often found these putters extremely helpful. However, after years of debate, the governing bodies decided the technique gave players too much mechanical stability. In 2016, anchoring the putter against the body was officially banned. This meant golfers could still use long putters, but they could no longer anchor them against their chest or abdomen while making the stroke. The rule sparked controversy across professional golf because several major champions had built their putting styles around anchored techniques. Another historic equipment controversy involved wedges rather than drivers or putters. The issue centered around the grooves cut into the club face. These grooves help create spin by gripping the ball during impact. One of the most famous examples was the Ping I-2 wedges produced by Ping. The I-2 wedges use square-shaped grooves that generated enormous amounts of spin, especially when hitting from rough grass. Normally, rough reduces a player's ability to control the ball because grass gets trapped between the club face and the ball. But the sharp edges of square grooves could cut through the grass and still produce high spin rates. This meant skilled players could stop the ball quickly on the green, even from difficult lies. Eventually, the governing bodies decided the grooves provided too much control, and new groove regulations were introduced to limit spin from the rough. The controversy became known as the Ping I-2 groove debate, and it lasted for years before equipment rules were clarified and standardized. Even adjustable clubs have faced restrictions. Modern drivers often allow golfers to change loft, lie angle, or weight distribution. These adjustments can dramatically alter ball flight characteristics. While such features are allowed, professional players are not permitted to adjust their clubs during a round. Once play begins, the equipment must remain exactly as it was at the start. The rule exists to prevent players from adapting their clubs to changing conditions mid-round, which could give them an unfair advantage. Some experimental equipment has gone even further, incorporating electronics into golf clubs. Engineers have tested laser-guided putters designed to project a beam showing the exact direction of the stroke. Others have developed smart putters equipped with vibration feedback systems that help golfers align their strokes more accurately. These technologies may be fascinating from an engineering standpoint, but they clearly violate the spirit of the game's rules. Golf has always emphasized the player's ability to judge alignment and distance without technological assistance. As a result, such devices are banned from competition. Interestingly, many of these banned clubs are still perfectly legal for recreational golfers. The equipment rules enforced by the PGA Tour and other professional tours only apply to official competitions. Casual players on weekend rounds can use whatever equipment they like. In fact, many golfers intentionally seek out non-conforming clubs because they provide noticeable performance benefits. This creates a fascinating contrast between professional and amateur golf. Professionals must follow strict equipment standards to ensure fairness at the highest level of competition. Meanwhile, everyday golfers are free to experiment with technology that might help them hit the ball farther or straighter. The existence of banned equipment also highlights how rapidly golf technology continues to evolve. Manufacturers constantly search for ways to improve performance through materials, science, aerodynamics, and engineering. Each new breakthrough pushes closer to the limits defined by the rulemakers. When those limits are exceeded, the result is often a club that becomes legendary precisely because it was deemed too powerful. In the end, the debate over banned equipment reflects a larger question about the nature of golf itself. Is the sport primarily a test of physical and mental skill, or should technology play a larger role in improving performance? The governing bodies have consistently chosen to preserve the traditional balance. By setting limits on club face flexibility, ball design, and mechanical assistance, they aim to keep the game challenging and fair. But for many golfers, the allure of forbidden equipment will always remain. There is something irresistible about using a club that professionals aren't allowed to touch. Whether it's a driver that launches the ball an extra 25 yards or a ball that magically corrects slices in mid-flight, these pieces of gear occupy a unique place in golf culture. They represent the point where innovation becomes so powerful that the rules have to step in and say, "This is just too good." Another category of equipment that has occasionally crossed the line into illegality involves drivers specifically designed to amplify what golfers call the spring effect. Modern drivers already push the limits of energy transfer allowed by the rules set by the engineers spend years trying to design faces that are thin enough to flex at impact, but still remain within the permitted performance threshold. But some experimental or niche market drivers deliberately ignore those limits. These clubs use ultra-thin titanium faces or special alloys that act like miniature trampolines. When the ball strikes the face, it compresses and then rebounds with more force than a conforming club can legally produce. The physics behind this is surprisingly simple. When a golf ball is struck, some of the energy from the swing is lost as heat, vibration, and deformation. Engineers try to minimize those losses so that as much energy as possible transfers directly into the ball. With a highly flexible face, the driver momentarily stores energy as the metal bends inward and then releases it as the face snaps back. This rebound adds velocity to the ball, effectively boosting the golfer's swing speed without requiring any additional effort. For a professional athlete whose drives already travel well over 300 yards, even a small increase in ball speed could translate into a massive advantage. Technological advantages could quickly overshadow the human skill that defines the sport. Yet those very restrictions are what make illegal clubs so fascinating. They represent the edge of what technology can do in golf. Just beyond the boundary set by the rulebook lies a world of equipment that hits farther, flies straighter, and performs better than anything professionals are allowed to use. And that forbidden potential is exactly what keeps golfers endlessly curious about the clubs that the pros simply aren't allowed to swing.